Dear friends, welcome in the Steiner branch, Chicago. So today we have presentation on Apocalypse number 11 from Florian Sydow. Florian is island of Oahu, and he is serving for decades as vice chairman. He is founding member of Kahumana community and farm, community and farm. And he's also outstanding organic architect, built almost each. So one time I will show that picture. So dear Florian, for joining us, and if you are ready, it's over to you.
Welcome everybody, far and wide. We have some pretty nice weather here in Honolulu. As you can see behind me, the weather's getting a little cooler, but of course we don't have much of a winter, just the surf comes up. Sometimes you get a little more rain, and that creates a situation where you have to become a lot more sensitive to witness the cycle of the year. And that's, I think, a motivation to enter into this etheric realm, which comes to expression in rhythms, which is a very important antidote to all of the machine world around us, all of these mechanisms, which Steiner referred to as having a kind of a demonic aspect to them. So healing impulses are very important. What is the remedy? I was just reading a place in a lecture where Steiner talks about the elemental beings, and he speaks of the gnomes, for example, which are associated with the element of earth, the solid material substances, that they are keenly intelligent. And their intelligence has a kind of immediacy to it. They don't have to think about things for a long time, it comes spontaneously. But they can also be playing tricks on people. They can be mischievous. In the old days, the miners who were aware of the gnomes would seek to unite with them on a soul spiritual level because they could help them to find the veins of gold and silver underground and see things that human beings couldn't see. But it's been quite a while since we've lost touch with that realm. The alchemists in the Middle Ages still witnessed them, but we are in a time where we need a new alchemy. And it's important that we begin to lift the veil of nature, what the ancient Eastern initiates called the veil of Maya and illusion, because everywhere behind nature are these elemental beings that make it possible for earth, air, water, fire, these four elements, to come to physical manifestation in the service of higher beings. However, he says, as long as the human being was really entering into this consciousness soul age and taking hold of the intellect, the gnomes kind of withdrew. And they kind of held back then also the other three types of elemental beings that are the undines, the sylphs, salamanders, fire spirits. But now that our intellect is weakening, there's a danger Steiner alluded to in this particular lecture, that these gnomes can create an alliance with Ahriman. And this would pose a great danger for humanity, because if this happens, then humanity will not be able to fulfill its mission of transforming the Earth into the future Jupiter condition. So I think it's important when one deals with these apocalyptic themes to, even though there is all this prophetic vision, human freedom plays a great role, and the mystery of good and evil is bound up with human freedom. And the potential for developing higher love, which is what will manifest in the future Jupiter or the New Jerusalem, which is referred to as the planet of love. That future sun Earth depends on human beings taking in the Christ impulse. It involves raising our consciousness to the sphere of imagination. And this is being helped by the fact that our ether bodies have been loosening for quite some time in the head region, and since the 1700s in the heart region, so that the stage is set for us to experience the etheric. But it comes to us in imaginative pictures, and we're kind of under attack. That organ is under attack with all these synthetic pictures from outside coming at us, at our children from early childhood already, with these screens that have become ubiquitous. So the seven seals are a kind of window into this imaginative world, and they can become a kind of schooling for this, to develop this faculty of imagination, because these higher imaginations have a moral quality. Steiner speaks of moral intuitions in his philosophy of freedom. So that this idea of taking 3 moral steps for every 1 step in occult development or higher development is something we can't do if we don't have this sphere of moral imaginations to awaken this, these new virtues, these new human qualities that we need to create and engender brotherhood, the goal of the next age. So let me share some of these slides here. So one of the themes that is very much a prominent feature with regard to the seals is this red and the blue. For example, the 4th seal with the being who has 1 foot on the water and other on the dry land, which are red and blue. It has to do with the inbreathing, the oxygenated blood, and then the outbreathing, often referred to as the blue blood, the carbon-laden blood. And inbreathing has a relationship to incarnating, outbreathing with excarnating. So the birth and the death mysteries, which pertain to the whole earth, are related to that. So when Rudolf Steiner introduced these seals to the public in Munich at that Congress in 1907, he wanted to have these seals hung, and this red and the blue was meant to play a very prominent role, because color is related to the world of cosmic feeling. So this is a verse that kind of, I think, relates to working with this kind of content. To resolve our past requires knowledge. To forge our future, we need courage. To experience the present, we must develop dedication. Our thinking needs riddles to wake up. Our feeling needs pain to mature. Our willing needs resistance to grow. So the mystery of evil provides that resistance, so that we need to develop the greater good in order to meet that resistance, like a forging of a sword in fire. This has to do with the steps towards the most important event in the whole of the sevenfold planetary evolution. And it's important to circle around. It's John, the divine, was given the symbol of the eagle, and one can see the eagle in the trinity of the lion, the bull, the eagle, which is there in one of the seals, together with the image of the human, threefold human, that still has sort of animal features, and the lamb in the middle, the sacrificial lamb. That's the being who's able to open the sealed book. That's the Lord of Karma. So the Last Supper was a prelude to the Passion. And you have this, just like in the Arthurian circle, you have Guinevere representing the moon and the mysteries of the night. You have Arthur representing the sun and the gold and day mysteries. And then you have the 12 knights. And around them, the greater number of knights who represent the star world, where they represent these 12, the constellations of the zodiac. And in the picture on the left there, you can see the dark figure of Judas. Judas is invited to the table. Judas is the betrayer. Without the betrayal, the crucifixion wouldn't have happened in the way it did. So the mystery of evil plays a part And these forces related to Judas can be related to the scorpion on the one hand, which is in a certain sense related to the lower nature. But the higher aspect of Scorpio is the ego. And John, the beloved disciple, is the only one who is strong enough to be present at that event of Golgotha. And in his gospel, you have these stages of initiation that we call the Christian stages of initiation. And the first one, having to do with the foot washing, has to do with a kind of protection against certain mysteries of evil that have to do with Ahriman, the Lord of Death. Unlike Lucifer, who comes from above and is cast down as the dragon into human heads and creates a kind of enlightenment that can be mingled with pride and selfishness. And yet, Lucifer is the light bearer. Lucifer is the preparer in a certain respect. But Peter, who saw the foot washing as kind of condescending, kind of indicated that he wasn't wanting to have Jesus wash his feet. But then Peter saith unto him, Thou shalt never wash my feet. And Jesus answered him, If I wash thee not, thou hast no part with me. Simon Peter saith unto him, Lord, not my feet only, but also my hands and my head. Jesus saith to him, He that is washed needed not save to wash his feet. So these Ahrimanic forces attack from below. They're very much at home in the interior of the earth. And Steiner showed how these 7 stages of initiation illuminate the 7 first layers of the interior of the earth. So this involves a redemption of the so-called hell regions of the earth. Like Dante was able to weave this into his great threefold drama that was partly inspired by the Knights Templars. And the Grail mysteries feed very much into this as well, where you have the spear, which is usually used in warfare and has to do with the Mars forces. Here you have it being wielded with compassion. And this Longinus, who sees that the high priest has sent out the people who are going to break the bones of the 3 on the cross. And Longinus is kind of defending the body of the Christ, because this was a way of making sure they were dead. And so he's then releasing that blood. And Steiner speaks of how there is an etherization process with that blood that not only flows into the earth, and has a redemptive power there, but is there in the atmosphere of the earth. And it's important to work with the lecture, The Etherization of the Blood, to enter into this very deep and significant mystery for our time. So beneath the cross, among the last words spoken by the Christ to Maria Sophia is, "Woman, behold your son." And to Lazarus John, "Behold your mother." So this communion that took place beneath the cross was a second initiation for Lazarus, who was the first to receive the Christian initiation. And in a certain respect, the last of the old initiation, which was renewed. And through this initiation, there was a uniting of Lazarus, who had been Hiram Abiff in a past earthly life and represented the Cain stream, and John the Baptist, who has been beheaded and was overlighting the disciples, whose parents were both of the priestly stream, the shepherd stream. So here you have a healing of the great chasm that had opened up in human evolution between the Cain and the Abel stream. And as I was saying earlier, the 7 stages of Christian initiation involved an illumination of the first 7 layers of the interior of the earth, a redemptive act. At the 8th layer is where the conflict between Cain and Abel is centered. And so through this second initiation of Lazarus John, this communion with the Maria, who not only was overlighted by the Sophia, but had a communion with the Sophia being at the same time that the baptism took place in the Jordan. So the Solomon Mary was in communion with the Nathan Mary. And at that same time that the baptism took place, the Sophia being united with the Maria being. And the Sophia represents the world soul, whose veil is the world of the stars, the Isis Sophia. The veil of the stars needed to be lifted in order to behold the astral world behind it. And she is the archetype of spirit self. So when one attains spirit self, this communion with the Sophia can take place. That's the goal of the whole earth evolution, is for the ego to transform the astral body into spirit self. And the first step in that direction will be the 6th age, which is being prepared by Lazarus John. And it will be called the Sophian age. So unlike the present age, where individuation, the consolidation of the ego, there it will be brotherhood, Philadelphia. But that will only be a small portion of humanity scattered across the earth. And the Slavic and Russian people have a special role to play in preparing that. So when the mystery of Golgotha took place, there was a tearing of the veil of the temple. The veil had 4 colors representing the 4 elements. And formerly only the high priest would raise himself on those steps and enter that sacred space. So the mysteries of the Holy and Holies, Holy of Holies, were opened up at that time. And there's reason to believe that the secret of that Holy of Holies is the same secret that's embodied in the New Jerusalem, the Golden City. That Holy of Holies was in the shape of a cube, just like the measurements of the New Jerusalem are a cube. And we know that salt forms a cubical crystal, and that in the alchemical trinity of sulfur, mercury, salt, sulfur is related to the will and the metabolic limb. The rhythmic system is related to this mercurial middle, where the healing forces are especially at home, and is the bridge then to thinking, which is epitomized in salt in the old alchemical trinity. So that on the Sermon of the Mount, Christ proclaimed, "Ye are the salt of the earth." So human beings are meant to waken this intelligence, but to raise it to a spiritual level, raise it to the sun realm of Michael, Christ. That sacred space in the Solomon's temple, it was all in gold. There were no windows. It was hidden in the darkness. But now, when the veil was rent, light was able to shine in and illuminate that darkness. And that's where the Ark of the Covenant was kept, with the cherubim hovering over it, whose wings spanned the entire space. That's where the Hebrews, after the time of Moses, were able to communicate with Yahweh, whose countenance at that time was Michael as a night spirit. And Elijah, who was closely aligned to Yahweh and Michael, reappeared as John the Baptist. There's, of course, deeper mysteries there. Elijah was really a Michaelic, archangelic presence, but Naboth was the soul and the human being who anchored it. And Naboth became the target of Jezebel, who worshiped the gods of Baal, who practiced dark magic. She reincarnated as Herodias. And Herodias is the one who suggested to her daughter, after she had done her dance at the birthday of King Herod, who was kind of overwhelmed and ready to give her up to half of his kingdom, when asked, when Salome asked, "What should I ask for?" Herodias suggested the head of John the Baptist. So that's the anti-grail mystery, the dark moon forces. So the Christ being, through this mystery of Golgotha descends into the interior of the earth, and those 7 stages of Christian initiation that he archetypally embodied in his own path of sorrows, in this passion that mainly the women were able to follow him. Any of the disciples were hiding at the time. So here we have those 7 stages of Christian initiation related to the interior of the earth. And in the Lemurian time, the fire earth, which is the 6th layer, was nearer the surface, and the surface crust was not hardened because the mineral kingdom only really came to play in the Atlantean period. And human passions and desires are closely connected with that 6th layer of the earth. And when human passions collectively become too engrossed in a one-sidedly physical manner, which materialism kind of engenders by telling us we're just higher animals, that resonates with this 6th layer, which is the home of the Ahrimanic spirits. And this is also where volcanism is engendered. And so the more human beings are caught up in regressive tendencies like racism and nationalism, which are currently out of their right timing, that's sort of the stage before the ego and puts human beings closer to the animal. That's why you have the group souls are related to the animals in the seal with the lion, the bull, the eagle, related to thinking, feeling, and willing. Certain types were more the thinking type, others the will type. The will type was more connected with the earth and more subject to these dangerous forces of the interior of the earth. And so that's what brought about the destruction of the Atlantean period, was these fire forces then consumed the earth at that time. So here at the bottom, I'm reiterating what I said earlier of this fragmentar earth, which is where the conflict between Cain and Abel is engendered, was overcome through the raising of Lazarus, and now the communion of the Lazarus John beneath the cross with the Sophia being. So that's a prefiguration of that future manas, which will involve the uniting of these 2 streams, which in the anthroposophical circles involved the Christian community on the one side and the anthroposophical on the other. That's why Rudolf Steiner indicated that he wasn't helping to bring this about as an extension of anthroposophy, but really in response to the request by the priests that this was a separate stream. Anthroposophy is a spiritual science, it's not a religion. And yet, a communion of these 2 streams is being prepared through anthroposophy, which has the task of preparing the 6th age of brotherhood, where the leading initiates will be this Lazarus John, these 2 beings who were united in that raising of Lazarus. So the Christ was then able to cross that 8th layer and establish his kind of anchoring at the center of the earth. But we need to remember that these are the hell regions of the earth. So there's a battle there at the center of the earth. And I've in other places sought to awaken people to the fact that this is the same battle on a macrocosmic level that is there in the pineal gland within the human head. So when, especially in this consciousness soul period where the ego is being consolidated, there's a danger that we harden this ego, which is really the gift of Lucifer. It's the stone that fell out of Lucifer's crown and that needs to be hollowed out, needs to be carved out like the grail vessel through compassion, through empathy, through bearing the suffering of others as our own. And when we begin to do that, then the Christ draws nearer to us. And suffering is a key to the building of the New Jerusalem, which has 12 gates, and each of those gates is a single pearl. How does the pearl gain its beauty? It's through suffering. And this is kind of the lesson of the purgatory stage of human development. Every time after death, we're in the Kamaloka period. We're in that purgatory sphere where we're being weaned of the attachment to the earth. And the pearl of great price is the moon that has arisen in this beautiful form of redemptive process that allows it to become a gateway to the lower Devachan. And from there, we can rise to the sun gate into higher Devachan, to the higher heavens. So the beauty of the pearl is related to the Sophia being who embodies spirit self. And the sixth age is the first beginning of embodying that. So that's the task that lies ahead of us. And I keep bringing this kind of meditation, which is really saying a lot in the amount of words involved. And this was from an esoteric lesson that Rudolf Steiner gave in 1918. And that was, of course, in the midst of the tail end of the First World War. So much suffering had been gone through with the burning of the Goetheanum, was sort of about to increase that pain tremendously. So with the event of Golgotha, when the blood flowed from the wounds of the great Redeemer, when the cosmic heart's blood penetrated the earth and its forces poured down as far as the center, the earth became illuminated from within, and light rayed outward into the surroundings. The opportunity was then given to every single human individuality to experience this light within the self. When the earth became the body of the great sun spirit, through having been impregnated with his spirit powers, all the beings on earth were equally endowed with these forces. The seed was planted for the reunion of sun and earth. The physical body of Jesus of Nazareth was the mediator through which the powers of the cosmos were united with the earth aura. And when the blood flowed from the body on Golgotha, the earth was taken up again into the sun power. Since then, this Christ power streams from its center into the surroundings, and from the sun, Christ's power streams into the earth. One could imagine this as a lemniscatory process that takes place in the yearly cycle of the seasons. one is able to experience this power, this light within oneself as a human being when one knows oneself to be a part of the earth, which as Christ's physical body is infused with his being. Then the white light streams towards one from within oneself as it streams out from the center of the earth. So by living into this imagination, we can begin to realize that our higher self, our collective higher self, is shining towards us from the center of the earth. And it's through the communion with this being that we can celebrate the resurrection, which had its archetypal beginning at the Easter morning, which we commemorate every Easter. And again, it's the women who play an important role there, because this is a birth out of death, in Christo morimur. So that has been planted as a seed in each and every one of us. The Christ is the archetypal ego. And we, in our freedom, can raise ourselves humbly to participate in this. And once we do, we recognize the Christ as a cosmic being. The Christ left his spirit man on the sun. His life spirit was brought into the etheric aura of the earth, and his spirit self into the hearts and souls of Joseph of Arimathea and the Grail stream, which is made up of individuals who are preparing this sixth age, which includes Joseph of Arimathea and Nicodemus, who took the body down from the cross. So unlike the Last Supper, which is commemorated in the Mass and the Communion, with Joseph of Arimathea and Nicodemus, you had the actual body, the actual blood, the actual laying in of the body into the earth, which took it up, just like we could take up a host at the communion. So the whole earth sort of took up this leaven that transformed it and continues to do so. The Christ is the 13th in the midst of the 12. The Christ is the sun being, which is something we need to recognize in order to raise Christianity to its true level. And we know through the teachings of this initiate Dionysius the Areopagite, who is a pupil of St. Paul, who helped to bring together a deeper understanding of the ninefold hierarchies and how the first hierarchy mediates the impulse of the Father God. The second hierarchy, the Son God, and the Holy Spirit through the angels, archangels, archai, who are closest to us. And these are, you could say, our higher self, which is threefold and related to the Holy Spirit to our thinking, the second hierarchy to our feeling, and the first hierarchy to our will. And it's through a communion with them that we will raise thinking to spirit self, feeling to life spirit, and our will to spirit man. This is the golden triangle that the Christ brought to humanity. That means that those future gifts are already there. However, there is the unholy trinity. There are the adversarial forces. The Luciferic beings are the counter spirits to the Holy Spirit, the Ahrimanic to the Son, the middle realm of the hierarchies, and the Azuric beings to the Father principle, the will. So in another esoteric lecture, Rudolf Steiner provides some insights, and he brings this into connection with the three gifts that the kings lay before the Jesus being. And he says there that in order to prepare for the three future stages, the mystery of Golgotha took place in the Greco-Latin. That was from 747 to 1413. And that's when the mystery of Golgotha took place. But in order to prepare the sixth age, which is called Sardis in the seven letters, the fifth age, and the sixth age, which is called Philadelphia, which is the Aquarian age of the future, and Laodicea, the seventh age, there needed to be representatives of the first three stages of our post-Atlantean epoch, who then needed to be raised from the dead by the Christ Jesus in order to prepare them to take on the task of helping to unfold the Christ impulse in these three future stages. So the one who represented the Egypto-Chaldean age was the youth of 9, who had previously, in legendary form, been the youth of Zeus, who Schiller wrote about in one of his dramas, who lifted the veil of Isis and was struck dead. And later then appeared as Mani, and beyond that as Parsival. This is the leading initiate of our fifth epoch. And this is also the leading initiate when it comes to the transformation of evil. And then we see that the Lazarus John is the one who represents the Persian epoch. He has a kind of twin. That was the age of the twins, which was Zarathustra. But Zarathustra had appeared as the Solomon Jesus. So his twin, Lazarus John, will have this task of preparing the sixth age. Lazarus John reappeared as Christian Rosenkreuz, as Le Count de Saint-Germain. And of course, there's the mystery of the two Johns connected there. So we have John the Baptist as well, who reappeared as the Raphael the painter, and later Novalis the sage in the German Romantic movement, which also flowed into anthroposophy. And then you have the representative of the ancient Indian epoch as the daughter of Jairus, who will play a leading role in that seventh age. So here we have the raising of the youth of 9, the metamorphosis of the Egyptian mysteries. So Rudolf Steiner speaks of how that group that was accompanying the mother of this youth who had died represented the mother Isis and the sons of the widow, the Egyptian initiates, whose mysteries had darkened and Osiris had been killed. So now there's a need to renew those mysteries. And this is really what's taking place through this raising of the youth of 9. So according to Rudolf Steiner, this Mani individuality, who is a reincarnation of the youth of 9, he has a task of preparing the future 6th epoch, not age, but epoch after the war of all against all. He's the being who's being prepared to become the human Manu. Until then, we have a Manu who is the leader of the White Lodge or the Great Mother Lodge that overlights humanity, just like the Catholic Church looks up to the saints. Anthroposophical esotericism looks up to this Mother Lodge, which has a 12-fold circle of higher initiates centered in the Manu. And the Manu in turn is overlighted by the Holy Spirit. So that up until this future time, the Manu is really a being who didn't begin their evolution at the same time as the rest of humanity, but brings a kind of grace element. And I would suggest that these 12 initiates are distinct from the 12 bodhisattvas, although some of these initiates also play a role among the bodhisattvas, where again there are 12. 6 appeared in the time before the mystery of Golgotha, culminating in the Buddha that we hear most about. But now in the post-Christian era, it's the new bodhisattva that takes over that role. And he's also preparing the 6th age. And in the 6th age, he will come forward and begin to reveal the micro-logos. He will be able to speak in such a way that his very speech will help to awaken human beings. This is the Maitreya Bodhisattva. So the grace element especially comes through the Bodhisattvas. And between their many incarnations, they rise to the Buddhi plane, where they're centered around the 13th, which is the Christ being himself. So they represent the 12 virtues of the Christ being that can only gradually become manifest, just like the 12 gates to the New Jerusalem represent the same 12 virtues. So the youth of 9 reappears as Mani and later as Parsival. So here we have a kind of preparing the new mysteries, having to do this. Obviously, this slide got a little distorted here. But the inspirers of Rosicrucianism are Mani on the one hand, the Buddha, and Zarathustra. Scythianus, Gautama Buddha, Zarathustra, and Steiner speaks of a special council and meeting that was a preparation for Rosicrucianism, where Mani presided, and his stature was above that of Zarathustra, which speaks of his future task as the new Manu. So Rosicrucianism embodies the working of these four individuals and the streams that they represent. So the higher stages of Rosicrucian initiation, one of which is reflected in the chemical wedding, was presided over by Mani and involves the deeper secrets of the mystery of evil, that Mani has a special task to prepare. This is again from another esoteric lecture where Steiner speaks of the initiation of Parsival by Titurel, and how you have then to begin with this experience where he witnesses this great tree, and on it are this white blossoms that sort of represents the lily. So that's sort of the first stage of the purifying the soul. It's a little like the Essenes who were able to push the evil out of their gates. But all the more did that evil attack the people outside their gates. And so Parsival was then able to notice that there was a certain stench around that lily representing what had been pushed out and purified. And he's then told, he heard a voice of Blanchefleur and beheld him, and behind him say, "You are that," which means he is this lily tree. But then he's given a new vision. The old vision darkens and a new vision appears. And he then witnesses a cross with 7 roses. And he then hears the voice of Fleur, whose symbol was a red rose behind him, that you should become, or you should become that. So these two, asceticism can lead to the lily, but it would lead us away from the earth and pray to Lucifer. And a lot of the Eastern mysteries before Christ tread that path of not valuing the earth, wanting to transcend the physical plane. But Christianity brought the descent to the earth to bear the cross of earthly karma. And without that, the ego, the higher ego represented by the roses around the cross, and the mystery of love could not have come about. So this is kind of depicted in a medieval legend that is one of a version of by Conrad Fleck in 1230, Fleur and Blanche Fleur. And it's a deep kind of tale, but it involves this marriage of opposites, which in a certain respect also represents the Cain and the Abel stream uniting in the mystery of love. So this was something that was being prepared through Parzival, who in turn was bringing it into the Rosicrucian stream. So we've talked about how we then have the task of preparing the sixth age, the future age of spirit self. And we have various forces that are seeking to prevent this from happening, one of which is the intervention of the sun demon Zorat, which follows a cycle of 666 years, which I'm not going to spend a lot of time with. We've gone over it in other presentations, but the second after the first was in Gundi Shapur, and it flowed very much into the Arab stream, which helped to engender a materialistic science. And then the capturing and torturing of the Knights Templars by Philip le Bel, where the sun demon was involved in those torturings. And the mystery of gold was very much involved, which is the sun mysteries that the Templars were seeking to bring, a new cosmic sun Christianity. Whereas Philip le Bel represented the darker mysteries of the gold. He had a former incarnation in the Mexican mysteries, which were the anti-sun mysteries in South America. So you had then a third 6/6 cycle that culminates in 1899, but these are epicenters in time. They're not just kind of reduced to a few years around that 1998 date, but it reaches all the way to 1933, for example, on the one side, and into our present time, because this is a very powerful being and much more powerful in this third impulse. And I've thought to show how there's then a 33-year rhythm that began in 1899, was the end of the Kali Yuga. 1900 is the dawning of a new age of light. And the Christ brought a new 33-year rhythm. And so the first 33 years of that new rhythm culminates in 1933. And just like there's a battle at the center of the earth, there's a battle that at that time was centered in Europe. And now we have a third 6/6 cycle that coincides with the third of these 33-year rhythm, which has to do with thinking. And here, the counter impulse is centered in America, where the subnature forces are particularly strong. And Ahriman is preparing his incarnation in the West, where America can be seen as kind of the platform for that incarnation. And so these are all forces that seek to prevent this unfolding of the spirit self age. And I've in the past differentiated between the unfolding of the epochs as reflected in the cycle of lectures that Steiner gave in Nuremberg on the book of Revelation, the Apocalypse, and the one interpretation he gave closer to the end of his life, just before his last address in September. I think September 22nd was where the last of those 18 lectures were given. There he speaks of a consciousness soul interpretation. And in that consciousness soul interpretation, we're in the age of the trumpets. And the sixth trumpet began to sound in the 1840s when all of humanity was crossing the threshold. And that's where the seal is involved with the two pillars. And since the turn of the millennium, the seventh trumpet has been sounding, where the woman clothed with the sun, standing on the moon and crowned with the stars appears. But also the seven-headed dragon who seeks to devour the child and will actually succeed with a large part of humanity. That's a regression into racism and nationalism at a time when we're meant to transcend it and move towards a Michael age that is cosmopolitan, that is planetary in scope, that witnesses the second coming in the etheric, which has been there since the 1930s. But Hitler also appeared at that time to counter that. That was the beast that is spoken of in the book of Revelation. So this is the letter to the Church of Philadelphia. That is the sixth age we're looking towards. And it speaks of the key of David. David was both a shepherd and later a king in his life. And so that's kind of a key to that future age. A door will be opened that no one can shut. These are really the firstborn who will become sealed and prepare the sixth epoch, which will culminate in after the seventh age in the war of all against all. So at the time, this is related to this Philadelphia age that we're supposed to be preparing that will run from 3573 to 5733. A time will come in the physical evolution of the earth. It will be after the year 5700, when if he fulfills his rightful evolution, man will no longer tread the earth by incarnating in bodies derived from physical parents. In that epoch, women will be barren. Children will no longer be born in the manner of today if evolution of the earth takes its normal course. There must be no misunderstanding about such a fact as this. Something else, for example, might come about. The Ahrimanic powers, which under the influence of the impulses working in men today are becoming extremely strong, might succeed in preventing Earth evolution in a certain respect. It would then become possible for men, by no means for their good, to be held in the same form of physical life beyond this time in the sixth or seventh millennium. They would become much more like animals while continuing to be held in the grip of physical incarnation. One of the endeavors of the Ahrimanic powers is to keep humanity fettered too long to the earth in order to divert it from its normal evolution. Precursors of this are transhumanism and posthumanism. However, if men really take hold of the best possibilities for their evolution, then in the sixth millennium, they will enter for a further 2,500 years into a connection with the earth world of such a kind that they will, it is true, still have a relationship with the earth, but a relationship no longer coming to expression in the birth of physical children. In order to make this picture graphic, I will put it like this. In the clouds, in the rain, in the lightning and thunder, man will be astir as a being of spirit and soul in the affairs of the earth. He will pulsate, as it were, through the manifestations of nature. And in a still later epoch, his relationship to the earthly will become even more spiritual. So this is related to the eugenic birth mysteries of the future. In the seventh millennium, the bodily nature will be capable of development only until the 14th year of life. Women will become barren. An entirely different form of earthly life will ensue. This is the epoch when the moon will again approach the earth and become part of it. Just as the separation of the moon was a decisive event, so too will be its re-entry. It is true that as human beings, we shall still be inhabiting the earth, although birth will no longer take place in the ordinary way. We shall be connected with the earth by other means than through birth. Man's being needs to have reached a higher level of existence when in the 8th millennium, women will become barren and the moon will unite once again with the earth. The earth must then remain behind, with man directing and controlling it from outside like an object, which he need not carry over with him into cosmic existence. Man must so prepare himself that he need not be involved in what must inevitably develop upon the surface of the earth. From pre-earthly existence, man is descended to this earthly life. His birth from women began with the departure of the moon. But this physical form of birth is only a passing episode in the great sweep of cosmic evolution and will be replaced by another. It is the phase which was destined to bring to man the feeling and consciousness of freedom, the self-completeness of individuality and personality. So this is being prepared through Rosicrucianism. Christian Rosenkreuz, in his incarnation in the 18th century as guardian of the innermost secrets of the molten sea and the golden triangle, the secret may not yet be revealed. It remains a possession of a few initiated Christians. It is sealed up in the casting of the molten sea and in the golden triangle. It is the same as the secret belonging to Christian Rosenkreuz to begin with. Christianity is bound up with the purely materialistic culture of the 4th and 5th epochs, and true Christianity of the future, which possesses the secret of the molten sea and the golden triangle, only exists secretly. This Christianity has another symbol, no longer that of the crucified Son of God, but the cross encircled by the roses. This will become the symbol of the new Christianity of the 6th post-Atlantean epoch. Out of the mystery of the Brotherhood of the Rose Cross will arise the Christianity of the 6th cultural epoch, which will recognize the significance of the molten sea and the golden triangle. The molten sea is what is created when the appropriate amounts of water and molten metal are cast. The 3 apprentices do it wrongly, and our casting is destroyed, and the casting is destroyed. But when the mysteries of fire are revealed to Hiram by Tubal-Cain, is thereby enabled to unite water and fire in the proper way. This brings the molten sea into being. This is what the secret of the Rosicrucian is. It is brought about when the water of calm wisdom, this is the Abel stream gift, is united with the fire of the astral world, with the fire of passion and desire. But now purified and redeemed. This is the Cain stream. A union must be brought about, which is of bronze, that is to say, is lasting and durable, must endure into the next epoch when the secret of the sacred golden triangle, Manas, Buddhi, Atman. This triangle, with all which it entails, will form the content of the new Christianity of the 6th epoch. So in order to undergo this transition that will take place towards the end of that sixth age, where human beings will no longer be born on the physical plane, is kind of characterized here. A time will come in the physical evolution of Earth, it will be after the year 5700, when, if he fulfills his rightful evolution, will no longer tread the earth by incarnating bodies derived from physical parents. In that epoch, women will become barren, children no longer reborn in the manner of today, if evolution on the earth takes its normal course. So I think this is something we've already covered in a certain respect. So let me move on here. The first death. A time will come in the physical evolution of the earth. It will be after the year 5700, when, if he fulfills his rightful evolution, man will no longer tread the earth by incarnating in bodies. And so you must not misunderstand the fact, the Ahrimanic power, which under the influence of impulses working men today are becoming extremely strong. So I think we've also covered this to a certain extent. So what it refers to is the first death. Towards the end of that epoch, human beings will have to leave behind the physical body. And without the help of Christ, they will not be able to unite their ego and astral with the etheric in the necessary fashion. So there will human beings who succeed in that due to the helper, the Christ being, who helps them to undergo this collective death where the physical body is left behind. And those human beings who have not embraced the Christ but rejected him, and who will not be able to face that first death in a manner that is intended. Instead, they will long for the physical body. They will suffer greatly because they are still caught very much in the world of instincts and desires. And this is all related to the eighth sphere, which has to do with a different course of human evolution than the one attended by the progressive spirits. And it's in our transition from the fourth to the fifth stage of evolution, from the Earth to the Jupiter condition, that the eighth sphere, the mystery of evil, comes powerfully to the fore. We're called to transform the planet of wisdom, the heritage of the old moon, into the future of planet of love. But we can only do that with the Christ impulse. So those who don't take that up, they don't have access to this golden triangle that the Christ implanted in human evolution, that allows us to rise to spirit self, later to spirit, life spirit, and ultimately to spirit man, the transformed astral, etheric, and physical. So there's going to then have to be a separation in this transition to the Jupiter condition, where a part of humanity will not be able to participate in this new sun Earth, where the Earth becomes transformed into a sun, and they will be cast out and live on a kind of moon that will surround that future Jupiter, because they will have missed an important opportunity. But the light from that future Earth sun will also have a redeeming influence on some of those souls. So that will be part of the task of helping those who have fallen, which is really related to the fall of Babylon, will have the opportunity to be redeemed. So in order to understand this battle, which is very much a part of one that we're facing in our time, we have to wake up to the concept of the eighth sphere. So the 7 planetary evolutions correspond to the 7 bodies. Besides there is an 8th, which everything goes that cannot make any connection with the continuous evolution. This already forms itself as a predisposition in the devaconic state, when a human being uses life on earth only to amass what is of service to himself alone, only to experience an intensification of his own egotistical selves. This leads in devacon into the condition of avicii, meaning the soul becomes chained to the interior of the earth. A person who cannot escape from his own separateness goes into avicii. All these avicii men will eventually become inhabitants of the 8th sphere. The other human beings will be inhabitants of the continuing chain of evolution. It is from this concept that religions have formulated the doctrine of hell. The writer of the Apocalypse, this is another lecture series in Christiania. The writer of the Apocalypse turns his clairvoyant attention to the fact that these people who are becoming one with matter, who are using up the spiritual forces they possess like an old inheritance without joining company with Christ, such people would gradually lose devacon. Kamaloka would last longer and longer, and they would be captured, united with the gravity of the earth. It's a little bit missing there. So this very much plays a role in our time. The protection that the progressive gods have placed in the cosmos to prevent us from being overwhelmed by the 8th sphere was brought about through the extrusion of the moon during the ancient Lemurian period, which is embodying the hardest substances within the earth. So it represents a kind of bulwark against the 8th sphere, a kind of protection against the 8th sphere, which is there. The moon is representing everything within the orbit of the moon. So it includes the earth and the interior of the earth. The 8th sphere reaches into the interior of the earth. The moon now circles the earth as a reflector and regulator, containing those beings who, had they remained behind, would have fettered humanity to material existence. From the moon, they continue to work, but in a manner tempered by cosmic rhythm. Their forces help to shape heredity, growth, and reproduction. Yet their sphere confines them so that the human soul may develop consciousness on the earth. So the moon leaving the earth is directly connected with the beginning of hereditary love implanted in the lower nature of humanity. In the occult sense, the moon stands between humanity and the abyss of the 8th sphere, between freedom and petrification. When the moon separated from the earth, certain spirits, beings withdrew with it. Had they remained bound to the earth, humanity would have been seized by the forces of the 8th sphere, a sphere that draws spiritual substance down into premature materialization. Through the moon's withdrawal, the earth was preserved from being absorbed by these hardening, retarding powers. The moon thus became a guardian body, holding back Ahrimanic forces and enabling the human eye to evolve in freedom. In Steiner's picture of the moon, acts as a cosmic firewall, reflecting forces that would imprison thought in dead mechanism. Today, digital infrastructure, satellite grids, cloud networks, global data orbits mirror the moon's reflective function, yet risk becoming its inversion. A new synthesis of the 8th sphere where consciousness externalizes as code. The challenge is to cultivate an inner moonlight of consciousness, a reflective moral intelligence capable of transforming technological light into wisdom rather than entrapment. As Steiner wrote, the task remains to spiritualize the intellect before it hardens into mechanism. So this is just drawing some ideas from the lecture series, The Occult Movement in the 19th Century, where Steiner speaks, especially in lecture 4 and 5, of these influences of the eighth sphere. Steiner's prophetic vision. In the seventh millennium, human bodies will mature only to the 14th year. Women will cease to be fertile. An entirely different earthly existence will arise. That will be time when the moon will again approach the earth. Humanity must begin to attend to extraterrestrial events to recognize the moon's re-entry will transform earthly life. Meanwhile, our intellect is becoming more and more shadowy, capable of understanding only the mineral world. Since the last third of the 19th century, beings from beyond the earth have begun to descend, Vulcan, Venus, and Mercury beings, bringing impulses of spiritual science. But if humanity resists, the events will fall into chaos and the moon reunites with it. Then from the earth will spring forth a terrible, horrible brood, mineral plant-like spider beings possessing tremendous intellect. All the unreal thoughts people now think will be endowed with being and life. Steiner's image of the earth ensnared by a web of living intellect finds uncanny echoes today. The World Wide Web is itself a planetary net of thought. Its search engines, even called spiders and crawlers. Artificial intelligence and data networks externalize our shadowy intellect, giving independent life to human thinking. Biocomputing and organoid intelligence suggest matter infused with cognition, a mineral plant form of awareness. As Steiner warned, humanity must choose to enliven the intellect through spiritual insight or become interwoven into the mechanical web of our own creation. The acceptance or rejection of spiritual science, knowledge, is a serious matter facing mankind. It affects the whole configuration of the cosmos. So quantum physics and the threshold of the eighth sphere, in his 3-volume series From Silicon Valley to Jundi Shapur, I think it's the other way around, from Jundi Shapur to Silicon Valley, Paul Emberson proposes that the subatomic domain revealed by quantum physics is not merely a natural realm of particles, but a threshold where the forces of the eighth sphere begin to manifest. The quantum world is not beneath matter, but behind it, a spectral counterspace where spiritual substance is being drawn into a luciferic Ahrimanic reflection of creation. In this view, quantum phenomena such as fields, entanglement, and non-locality are outer signatures of processes within the eighth sphere, a realm striving to initiate creation without life, to imitate creation without life. Quantum computing operates at cryogenic temperatures near absolute zero, conditions that resonate with Steiner's depiction of Ahriman as surrounded by freezing cold. Superconductivity, coherence, and qubit control rely on suppressing all warmth and life activity, creating a sphere of absolute stillness. Here the intellect hardens into pure mechanism. Emberson identifies this descent as humanity's entry into the freezing clarity of subnature, where consciousness externalizes itself in cold, lifeless precision. When warmth departs, intelligence hardens into mechanism. Quote from Rudolf Steiner. Rudolf, Steiner taught that subnatural forces must be met with supernatural awareness. The challenge is not to reject quantum technology, but to spiritualize perception, to recognize the ethical dimensions of temperature, light, and thought. True progress depends on infusing the cold precision of matter with moral imagination and human warmth, transforming intelligence into wisdom. Our task is to spiritualize the intellect before it hardens into mechanism. So we're kind of well on our way to now bringing these forces of the eighth sphere into our daily life, where these quantum computing, and I would suggest that these books by Paul Emberson, which have gone through various editions, they're very hard to come by. They're in 3 volumes. Each of them are like 1,000 pages. He's also written a book called Mechanism and the Human Spirit, another one called The Death of Nutrition and the Resurrection of Humanity, are well worth delving into to deepen our relationship. He was one of the few who really, together with others, took on the task of the Strader technology, creating an organization called Anthrotech, which had centers in Switzerland and continues in Scotland and elsewhere. But there was a tendency to kind of turn away from technology. And I think that has a little bit of this Lily kind of a scene aspect where you push the evil out. And I think this played a role in their not succeeding with their efforts at Strader technology, because we need to take up the Rose Cross impulse. So you will see that man is related to all the layers of the interior of the earth, for they are continually radiating out their forces. Humanity lives under the influences of these layers and has to overcome their powers. When human beings have learned to radiate life on earth and have trained their breathing so that it promotes life, they will overcome the fire earth. When spiritually they overcome pain through serenity, they overcome the air earth. When concord reigns, the divisive layer is conquered. White magic triumphs. No evil remains on earth. Human evolution thus implies a transformation of the earth's interior. In the beginning, the nature of the earth's body was such as to hold subsequent developments in check. In the end, when human powers have transformed the earth, it will be a spiritualized earth. In this way, man imparts his own being to the earth. But of course, certain forces that remain behind will be cast out. In a sort of a valuable compendium that you can find in a book called The Birth of a New Agriculture. This was given by Aldebert Graf von Kaiserling, one of the sons of Count and Countess Kaiserling, where the agricultural course took place. In that book, there's sort of the 28th esoteric conversation that Steiner had with the Countess Kaiserling, who was clairvoyant. This is one of the exchanges. She would do her own research and then have certain questions for Steiner. So this took place after the agricultural course. Quote, golden inner kernel in the center of the earth. The kernel of the earth consists of golden fire, around which the dark girdle of the smoke of the mineral realm is cast. The interior of the earth made out of that gold, which comes from the hollow cavity in the sun and which is destined to return there. Question to Rudolf Steiner. This golden kernel was named by Ptolemy the primeval sun. And this was confirmed in that conversation by Rudolf Steiner. So this is kind of a picture of where the Christ then anchored himself as the spirit of the earth. And that's where this battle is. The sun demon who would like to harden the earth and pull it back towards the old moon forces in the sense of the backward Grail mysteries. This is where we can begin to work through the seasonal festivals, especially Easter and Michaelmas. So the human double is also needing to be taken into consideration because it derives its forces from the interior of the earth. Forces radiate out from the center of the earth around the planet, and these doppelganger beings who enter just before birth and have to leave just before we die, generally speaking, and are the source of illnesses that arise from within the organism. They have a geographic affinity. Some prefer the eastern part of the earth, others the west. And we know that the west is especially where the Ahrimanic doppelgangers seek to enter into a relationship with human beings, and they nest themselves in the subconscious of the human being. And these subnature forces are very powerful in the American continent, where they blaze through the earth and affect the population. And this can awaken forces of will to kind of neutralize that. And Steiner points to Ralph Waldo Emerson as someone who embodied that. But he was not just an American in his spiritual life. He was familiar with Goethe. He was familiar with the Eastern spiritual wisdom. So we need to study the etheric geography of the earth in order to understand the power that Ahriman will especially work with in the Americas, where the north-south mountain ranges are. So there's a certain connection with the masculine and the Americas and the feminine and the East. All the world religions were born in the East because there's a tendency to have a looser connection with the spiritual world. But colonialism from the West invaded the East and introduced Western influences into the East. And Western surrogates then began to take hold, as is the case in China right now and in India, which have become tech hubs on the planet. But these have been exported from the Anglo-American world especially, and Western Europe. So where the north-south mountain ranges run, that's where the magnetic forces are strongest, and that's where Ahriman especially works with the forces of iron that are connected with the Earth's magnetism. So this is where this danger that I mentioned earlier of the gnomes allying themselves with Ahriman becomes a danger if human beings aren't awake and raising their intellect into the sun sphere of Michael. It's because we are living between the subnature and the supernature forces, and in the second half of the Earth's evolution, which began in the middle of the Atlantean period, the death forces will get ever stronger. So these death and decay forces are connected with our waking up to consciousness in the consciousness soul period. Without those death forces, we couldn't think. We would be in a more vegetative state. So we need these forces, but we can't let them overwhelm us. And that's kind of the danger, is that humanity has been crossing a lower boundary of nature into subnature, and modern science, which was very much prepared through the Arab stream, which received the forces of the sun demon in the first 666 and carried it to the West as a lunar religion that sought to conquer the West and was held back in Europe, where the Grail mysteries were cultivated. But some of those forces came through in as much as the persons who were at home in Jundi Shapur, those influences pervaded the Arab world and were very much taken up by these two individualities that Steiner refers to in the Karma lectures as the person who later appeared as Francis Bacon, who is, you could say, the father of the Royal Society, and Comenius, that had their former incarnations in the Arab world. And these forces are such that humanity is in danger of these subnature forces pulling us into the eighth sphere. We have a caricature of Christianity, which is one of the ways that Ahriman prepares his incarnation. And the nuclear forces can be seen as one of the tip of the iceberg of what Steiner called the third force associated with the Azuric beings. The Luciferic beings began to attack humans' astral body in the Lemurian period, which was a recapitulation of the old moon period. Ahriman in the period referred to as the Hyperborean, that's a recapitulation of the old sun, where Ahriman forces remain behind. There you have magnetism and the attack on the etheric body. And that took place in the Atlantean time, especially. And the good gods, the progressive gods, brought illness in to counter the Luciferic attack on the astral body. They brought karma in as a counter impulse to the influence of Ahriman, to where over incarnations we can redeem the influence of Ahriman. But now we're a period where the Azuric beings, who are the counter forces to the Father God, who work more powerfully and deeper, connected to the human will forces, begin to make their appearance. And they attack the ego itself. And Rudolf Steiner describes how they work, especially through sexuality, not just individual sexuality, but group sexuality, and sort of the beginnings of black magic all often begin there with sadomasochistic kinds of developments, and that they attack the ego and they tear parts of the ego out, and that their influence is unredeemable. So they pose a danger that is now coming into the foreground, and they spread from America outward, in my view. So this is kind of the picture of the five-pointed star either turning upward towards the New Jerusalem. You can imagine the human being standing in that star, or the upside down pointed star, where the two upper points become the horns of the beast that sends out his black magical influences. So these subnature forces bear within them black magical influences to a certain extent, because they involve fallen astral, etheric, and still more powerful forces that oppose human ego development. This is the last words that Rudolf Steiner wrote to the members, warning of the influence of Ahriman associated with electricity, and that in order to counter the tendency of these Ahrimanic subnature forces to pull us down into subnature, we needed to rise as much above nature as these forces are below, which means cultivating a relationship to the etheric world. The etheric world is governed by levity. The sun is a suctional body that isn't the same as gravity. Gravity governs the subnature forces. Gravity contains the word grave, which is related to the death forces. Electricity always wants to enter the earth, the darkness. And in the modern scientific worldview, they defame light by suggesting it's there in the electromagnetic spectrum. But that is the torturing of light. That is the fallen light. And so modern science is a danger to our future without spiritual science as a counterbalancing influence. One of the more important lectures that Steiner gave is the etherization of the blood. And it's one of the places where he first really spoke about this subnature, supernature relationship of the subtle bodies to the subnature forces. And he speaks at the end there in response to what is electricity. Electricity is light in the submaterial state. Light is there compressed to the utmost degree. An inward quality too must be ascribed to light. Light is itself at every point in space. Warmth will expand in the 3 dimensions of space. In light, there is a 4th dimension. It is a 4-fold extension. It has the quality of inwardness as a 4th dimension. And what is that inwardness of light? It is thinking. But fallen light, electricity, also embodies thinking. But it's a thinking that is luciferic and captured by Ahriman and is pulling us into the 8th sphere. We need to discover the 3-fold sun. The outer sun illuminates the objects in space, but in that light is a second sun that illuminates and awakens the higher human self to its true sun nature. And there's still a 3rd sun behind that, which is the Christ himself, that we can commune with through the stage of intuition. So that involves arising from imagination when we raise thinking to the realm of light, becomes heart thinking. The heart is related to the sun. It's the microcosmic sun. And this kind of thinking involves a lemniscate between head and heart. Pineal gland is in the center of one and the heart at the center of the other. This is something Steiner speaks of in this etherization of the blood. But one of the things he says in there is that there is a macrocosmic counterpart to what he's describing there, and that the Rosicrucians have investigated this very carefully. And I've for decades been on the path of researching what this involves. And it leads to asking where the macrocosmic pineal gland is. And I've been speaking about that in this presentation. It's at the center of the earth. So just as the pineal gland needs to be carved out as a hard stone to become a grail vessel through compassion, and then it starts to shine like an inner sun within the head and that sun-like aura can extend as far as the heart. The same can be said of the whole earth. At its core, it has the macrocosmic counterpart to the pineal gland. And the Christ has begun the process of carving out that hard stone. But the sun demon seeks to reverse that in human beings and prevent them from reaching that golden center that shines ever more strongly now that the second coming and the etheric is happening, because the etheric aura of the earth is anchored there. The plants, which are mediators of the etheric in the visible world, they make the etheric visible. They are really sun beings on the earth. And when they take up the light of the sun, they're not just taking up the physical sunlight, but the etheric sun forces are being drawn up into the actual plant. And they're being transmitted through the stem of the plant, through the root of the plant. And all of the plants together have a gathering point at the center of the earth. So the plants have their common ego at the center of the earth. The plants teach us the mysteries of the grail. The chalice of the plant that sends up its fragrance to its beloved sun is the image of the grail cup. Our hearts have to open in the same manner to the spiritual sun that we can invite into our hearts, and then our hearts can begin to shine, and our heads can begin to think with heart thinking. So this is the battle is really a battle where we need love to engender the future earth, to become co-creators of the New Jerusalem. The second coming works through the elemental beings. That's why in the foundation stone meditation, it says the elemental beings hear it in north and south and east and west. May human beings hear it. I remember a eurythmist expressing this, where she would step forward and do this gesture of reaching out to the human souls when she spoke those last words, may human beings hear it. And so we have to lift the veil of the earth, air, water, fire, and behold once again the four classes of elemental beings who can be our helpmates and co-creators of the New Jerusalem. And their realm is being illuminated by the Christ in his second coming. So for that world, we need to become familiar with counter space, and projective geometry is the geometry that belongs to that world of levity. And it's the world that deals with the periphery of forces streaming towards the earth. And because our ether body is loosening in head and heart, we can begin to cross that boundary and experience the imaginations that we could witness in communion with the plant world in the Goethean sense of the archetypal plant. So building the New Jerusalem has to do with a higher kind of thinking. This higher kind of thinking was embodied in the Goetheanum. In the picture on the left, you can see it has a fontanelle like a child. It's open. It was like a Grail temple. And there's a metamorphosis of Solomon's temple there. So again, I'm showing that cube. In this last seal, we have the cube that's crystal clear. It's the realm of the Father God, ex Deo Nacimur. But the Father God has to call in the forces of Lucifer to create the three-dimensional world, which is necessary for human freedom. And Lucifer, in turn, invites Ahriman, the forces of death, which are needed to develop the human ego. but the Christ is able to transmute those serpent forces through raising this Luciferic impulse, purifying it. And one can do that through the arts, through beauty, which the Goetheanum sought to embody. And then one can rise through the evolutionary spiral, and the Son leads over to the Holy Spirit. And there above the Holy Spirit, you have the inverted Grail vessel, that this is where human beings who take these three steps of ex Deo nascimur, in Christo morimur, per spiritum sanctum revivissimus, contribute to the building of a new cosmos, the building of the New Jerusalem. And so in the future, I will be giving a series of 7 presentations dealing with the mysteries of the Grail that are kind of in seed form, hidden within this very deep 7th seal. In the folk soul cycle of lectures, Rudolf Steiner speaks of this mystery of willing related to old Saturn, feeling to the old sun, thinking to the moon, and that the ego is born on the earth, and that we create the future planet of love by bringing thinking, feeling, and willing into perfect harmony with each other. And that prepares the stage to reunite with the hierarchies. And out of that, this 6-pointed star is created. This was worked with by Rudolf Steiner and those who were invited to participate in the Freemasonic work, where this golden triangle was cultivated on the 3 altars. But there is a 4th altar, which involves the sun at midnight in the north. And so it's because the first class was meant to have 2 further parts. And then there was meant to be the second class. And finally, the third class, which Rudolf Steiner was going to lead. And he shared with certain close associates that he was intending in the third class to once again officiate at the 3 altars. That it's helpful to go back to these Freemasonic mysteries that Rudolf Steiner was cultivating back then in order to delve deeper into anthroposophical esotericism. The tragedy of the burning of the Goetheanum led to a metamorphosis at the Christmas Foundation, where Rudolf Steiner pretty much metamorphosed this foundation stone, the double dodecahedron, which represent the future Jupiter, into then human hearts, where it was planted. And this then was embodied in the foundation stone meditation. And what is it that grows out of that seed? It's really the new mysteries that were embodied in the first Goetheanum, which was a metamorphosis of Solomon's temple. So that you have this secret I've been talking about, quote, a man must develop certain organs for his higher development. To this end, certain concentrations are done in yoga exercises. When a man concentrates on the point between the eyes at the root of the nose with the thought, I am, he develops the organ that we call the 2-petal lotus flower, and that makes him into an eye. But it isn't enough that the organ of the ego is developed in man, so that the higher self can stream into him to make him into a higher being. We find the organ for this where a vertical line from the top of the head crosses a horizontal line through the root of the nose or a little above it. This organ is the pineal gland. Man makes a connection with the divine self in the world through the pineal gland. And here I want to show how, if you take a cross-section of the Goetheanum and you relate it to a cross-section of the human head, you can see that the podium where Steiner spoke as a kind of micro-logos manifestation, that is where the pineal gland would be if you relate the first Goetheanum to the human head, which was one of the secrets that Rudolf Steiner sought to reveal in a lecture he gave on the eve of that Christmas Foundation meeting. And so we have the task of working with that foundation stone meditation to rise through these stages of ex Deo Nascimur, in Christo Morimur, to Per Spiritum Sanctum Revivissimus, which involves not a baptism in water now, but a baptism in fire. That's what was happened with John beneath the cross, together with the Maria Sophia. That was a baptism with fire that bore its fruit at the Pentecost event. So the Pentecost event represents our own time, a kind of prelude to now the Christ coming not as the Son, but as the Holy Spirit. So this is the realm of divine thinking that comes through the angels, the archangels, and the archai. And that's what was meant to manifest itself in the Goetheanum. So we see the world of imaginations in the cupolas, and the one imagination that didn't just remain up there in the little cupola, but was brought down, was the one on the left that showed the threefold mystery of good and evil. So one of the things I want to kind of culminate here in is that we have this tendency to believe that when we made the scientific progression from the Copernican, from the Ptolemaic system to the Copernican system, the old childlike understanding of the universe of the ancients was left behind now that human beings have reached their maturity. Steiner says how different earlier outlooks were. Copernicus, for instance, freed men from the mistaken idea that the earth stands still. It was an error, he taught, to believe that the sun moved round the earth. His doctrine was further developed by Kepler and Galileo, yet Copernicus and Ptolemy were both right. It all depends on the standpoint from which you're looking at sun and earth. If you study our solar system from the astral and not from the physical plane, Ptolemy's system is right. There is the earth at the center, and the situation is as the ancients described it. We need only remind ourselves that on the astral plane, everything appears reversed. The Ptolemaic system holds good for the astral plane, whereas the Copernican system for the physical plane. Steiner describes how, aside from the three laws that Copernicus brought, there's a third that is generally not taken adequately into account, that speaks of a kind of a spiralic motion in the cosmos that is depicted in this astronomical course where this sketch on the right was playing a role. So a reversal of the Isis-Osiris myth in our fifth post-Atlantean age. The world picture of Copernicus, Galileo, and Kepler is a Luciferic construction, precisely because it arose from the course and corresponds to our Ahrimanic forces of knowledge. Its content, please distinguish here between method and content, is a Luciferic one. Steiner spoke of a new Isis legend as relevant for our time as the death of Osiris by Typhon Ahriman was in the Egyptian age. projecting this materialistic, mechanistic astronomy onto the heavens has brought about the death of Sophia. Steiner went on to say, we do not lack Christ, but the knowledge of Christ, the Sophia of Christ, the Isis of Christ is lacking. Just as the Egyptians looked for Osiris to Isis, from Osiris to Isis, so we must learn to look again to the new Isis, the Holy Sophia. Christ will appear again in his spiritual form during the course of the 20th century, not through the arrival of external events alone, but because human beings find the power represented by the Holy Sophia. Isis Sophia, wisdom of God. She has been slain by Lucifer, and on the wings of the powers of the world carried her hence into the infinite spaces of the universe. The willing of Christ working in man shall rest from Lucifer, and on the boats of spiritual knowledge awaken in human souls. Isis Sophia, wisdom of God. So the stars once spoke to man, but there was a reason that it went silent, so that human beings can develop the strength to, in the future, speak to the stars once again, and that future is now. So below there's kind of a quote related to Willi Sucher talking about how the old astrosophy was laid on the altar and sacrificed because it had become decadent, and it was sealed in a cultic ritual in the second half of the 15th century. But now we need to create a new marriage of heaven and earth. And this communion of the two individuals, John the Baptist and Lazarus John, is a beginning in that direction. But we have to take it up. The whole book of Revelation relates to a marriage of the Lamb, the Christ, who has united himself with the earth and the wisdom of Sophia. The Copernican system tends to divorce us from the cosmos because it doesn't include the hierarchies that work through the stars. So we have to build this communion vessel. The chalice is given by the Aval stream, the base by the Cain stream. We have to unite these two streams in order to prepare the future marriage of heaven and earth. And as we do, we will gain the power to counter these adversarial forces that are involved in the battle at the center of the earth. So here I'm kind of giving this picture of how this Ptolemaic system, where the earth is the center, that's the only place we incarnate. And it's shown here related to the human head. And that between incarnations, we're passing through the moon sphere, Kamaloka, then into the lower Devachan, then through the sun gate into the higher Devachan, and then we pass out towards the zodiac and then return again. And again, we pass through the moon sphere to enter the earth. So it's only on the earth that we're physically manifest. So this is the macrocosmic human being. And there's a battle at the sun, and there's a battle at the center of the earth that we have to participate in through our relationship to the seasons. And there is a global brain that's been forming, and we're helping to build it. We're helping to co-create this global brain, and we're uniting ourselves with it, with our computers, with our smartphones, with our participation in the World Wide Web. So we have to counter that. And as I said before, quantum computing is the next big step. It involves a threshold that is about to be crossed, that will bring the eighth sphere still closer into our devices, into our homes. So we need to begin to see the earth in its etheric garment, in its astral garment. And Steiner speaks of this aura of the earth glowing with a reddish glow in the Americas that involves subnature blazing through the crust. But in the Asian, Russian sphere, it's blue-violet. And unlike America, where the subnature forces are blazing through the earth and affecting the population. And this is where Ahriman will seek to lead humanity astray, especially through those north-south mountain ranges, where Silicon Valley, where the Gates Empire, and where the South American ranges continue all the way from Canada down, where the old Mexican mysteries were cultivated, where the cartels are sending up their drugs, etc. In Russia, in contrast, the light shines down from above and is reflected back up from the earth. And that is what the true Russian folk soul that's preparing the future will draw from. And that blue violet continues all the way to the Middle East, where in Palestine, the seed for the New Jerusalem was planted at the turning point of time. And Steiner speaks that there's a golden crystal form that shines out of the earth, out of that bluish violet, as a seed of the future New Jerusalem. And that's really what we have to participate in building. That seed is there within each and every one of us. Thank you very much for your patience.
Dear Florian, thank you so much. So, super intense, very long presentation. Thank you. Thank you. So are you able to answer some questions?
Sure.
Yes, yes. Okay. Okay, dear friends, do you know how to raise your hands, right? Yeah, please do so. Yes, I mean, I have one question. How quick? You know, after year of 5700, so as you said, so humanity will lose a capacity to procreate physically.
Mm-hmm.
But Steiner also mentioned kind of dark mysteries which will happen in America by fallen angels, which will provide still for some period of time, maybe for a long time, a physical procreation. You know, it's an important question because, like, for example, Andrew Linnell, like from Mistech, saying so, yeah, it's, I mean, he's under impression, so it will be pretty normal way of procreation, which during six cultural period in America. So, but you know, I'm under impression, so it's abnormal. It's dark. It's dark.
Mm.
This is a question.
Yeah, so I think in a couple of the quotes I quoted, Steiner spoke of the efforts that will continue to propagate into this seventh age that will ultimately lead to the war of all against all. That is called the American epoch. In the book of Revelation, it's considered to be lukewarm and neither hot nor cold. So it's said to be overripe. And in the Atlantean time, the ripe fruit of that entire sevenfold epoch with its 7 ages, was the 5th of the Atlantean. And that's what was led over by the Manu into the post-Atlantean to start the post-Atlantean. And the 6th and 7th were overripe. And in a similar way, the 7th will be overripe. But unlike then, the Atlantean, the first half was a descending phase. And the ego was first given in a kind of transcendent fashion at the middle of the Atlantean period. And in the second half, the mineral kingdom comes into play, and ultimately that will then lead to the water catastrophe. But the Manu has then prepared this ripe fruit of gathering together actually those human beings who had lost the old clairvoyance and who were representing the beginning of the dawning of kind of the consciousness that was needed to descend to the earth and awaken the true ego. Those are the souls he was bringing. They weren't valued at that time because they were seen as stooping down to the earth. Just like in the ancient Indian period, where you recapitulate to a certain extent, they looked up to the Luciferic. They didn't value the earth. So there is a kind of admonishment in the first letter. You have forgotten your first love, which is the earth. Christ wanted human beings to love the earth because that's where our human destiny unfolds. So now, as we move into the transition from our present 5th age, and you can again take the number 5 and symbolize it by the 5-pointed star that can either turn upside down or right side up. And this is related to our freedom. And one can go deeper into that symbol. But I want to then go to the 6th step, is where you have as a symbol the 6-pointed star, the 2 triangles. It's a communion of the heavenly and the earthly, the divine and the human. It's the result of what the foundation stone meditation is aiming at. It arises through this balancing of thinking, feeling, and willing, which the foundation stone helps us to cultivate by realizing that our thinking, feeling, and willing are reflections of divine willing, the Father, divine feeling, the Son, and divine thinking, the Holy Spirit. So the 6th age will involve human beings from all over the planet, scattered human beings who begin to take up this cosmopolitan Michaelic impulse at the same time that others are falling backward into racial and ethnic strife, which will eventually lead to the war of all against all. But aside from this crossing of the upper boundary, which is necessary to counter the subnature forces and witness the second coming in the etheric, which is needed to amplify the relationship to the cosmic Christ, which is a way of building the New Jerusalem. Steiner speaks of how we are helping to build the actual future body of the Christ. Faith builds the astral body. Our etheric body is the love body. Our physical body is the hope body. And that if we don't raise our consciousness into this realm of the Sophia being, who kind of is the archetype of spirit self, if we instead allow technology such as transhumanism, posthumanism, which I described as a precursor to that future American epoch. In that one quote I said, where Steiner spoke of that this end of the sixth age corresponds to this transition described as the first death, where those more advanced human beings who are fulfilling the destiny of that sixth age will rise from the physical plane because human propagation will no longer be possible for them. And they will leave the physical body behind and have as their lowest member the etheric body, which is only possible with the help of the Christ being. So they are preparing that future sixth epoch. They are the ones that will survive the great war of all against all, because Christ will give them the remedy they need. He describes at one point that at the end of the seventh age, the whole earth will be turned into an electromagnetic device that will resonate with the subnature forces. And the Tesla was one of the people who was a great inventor, and he had imaginative consciousness, but he married himself to the subnature force and was able to be a kind of pioneer of these subnature forces, as are many other scientists, like Edison helped Ahriman to say, let there be light, by inventing the light bulb in 1879 when the Michael Age began. Michael Age began in 1879 and prepared the capacity to overcome the Kali Yuga and celebrate the dawning of the Age of Light. But in the meantime, in the 1840s to 1879s, the spirits of darkness had been cast down, and they're the ones who are inspiring us to unite with the double, to regress to racism and nationalism. So when Steiner says that in this American epoch, those who continue to propagate beyond that point of the sixth epoch will animalize the human being, this is because those human beings are preparing what will be separated into two races, although race as a designation doesn't mean the same thing anymore. After the war of all against all, there will be two groups of human beings. One will bear in their countenance the beauty that has arisen through their communion with the Christ and the Sophia, and will shine with that etheric golden light. They will be given the white garment, so to speak. They will have received the seal and the name of the city of my God as forerunners of the New Jerusalem. But there's others who don't receive the seal, and they then are the ones who will bear the ugly countenance. But they will have to look upon those who they've had a karmic relationship with in the past that were blessed by the Christ. And those who have been blessed by the Christ will have the task of redeeming those who have fallen, who have taken on the ugly countenance of the beast because of the mark of the beast, which will be there in the economy, will be there in the technology. And so there's always going to be a point where we have to say, this is the boundary that I'm not going to cross. I think Paul Emberson took that boundary and placed it prematurely. But I think that boundary is going to be there at the end of the sixth age, when there's a choice between this propagation and what I'm suggesting will involve more of what we see as transhumanism now. It's really an attempt for the double to gain immortality. Rather than true immortality, it's the double want to survive death. Steiner said that libraries were the citadel of Ahriman. Think of what we're doing now with AI, where we're able to scrape the whole internet, and we've already gotten to the point where the lower hanging fruit has been all scraped up. And so now we've got the Google libraries that are in competition with China, and this seven-headed dragon is really got one body. Nationalism, racism, China, America, Russia, Europe, they're all different heads of one dragon. And by demonizing the people of color or the people of different races, this is a precursor to the war of all against all. The race, the battle between the genders is going to increase. In a recent lecture I talked about in America, Steiner said there would be much more of a chasm opening up between the male and the female in America, that the male would tend to succumb to the Ahrimanic forces which work through the feet, and that this will cause human beings who don't want to reincarnate. They want to stay connected to the earth. And that's what transhumanism, posthumanism is aiming at. So that's, to me, what will take place more and more as an animalizing of human beings with this inclination to continue to propagate. And that's where these this return of the moon and human thoughts taking on the life of spider-like beings will, those human beings who remain incarnated will have to inhabit an earth filled with those spider-like beings, is what Steiner is kind of suggesting that will happen with this return of the moon, where the propagation forces begin to, and we will have many warnings before that. We are already seeing them now, where even among technologists, there's a lot of fear, even though they've never heard of Ahriman, of artificial intelligence. That's telling you something. The inventors themselves are fearful because Ahriman breeds fear. That's one of his most powerful weapons. So anyways, it's interesting that Peter Thiel has been given 4 lectures on the apocalypse. They're worth looking into because he's kind of, he's interpreting the book of Revelation in a kind of twisted fashion. And he shares that with many fundamentalist Christians of, and yet they have half truths or quarter truths as part of their picture. That's what makes it all the more seductive. So in my next presentation, I plan on spending a little more time with that Peter Thiel's view and how that's shared among the Christianity that is really under the spell of the Luciferic and Ahrimanic.
Oh, thank you. And of course, we have to emphasize that 6th cultural period will be, I'm trying to translate Rudolf Steiner, so embryonic as the most important cultural period of post-Atlantean period, because new supersensible member as spirit self will be sent upon heads of human beings, so they can accept it.
Yeah.
All right, thank you. I'm passing to Waldemar. Waldemar, can you hear me? São Paulo, Brazil.
Yes. Well, I don't know if I can still think after such a deluge of information. But I wanted to make just a small comment, 2 small comments. First, on quantum computing. Quantum computers will not have a different structure, a logical structure than computers of, regular computers. They will be only faster. They will work with the same principles, logical principles as our present computers. For instance, they will only work with numbers as our computers do. So whatever one cannot transform into numbers, like a tree, a real tree, it will never be able to be processed or created by a computer. Secondly, you have spoken about transhumanism and posthumanism. These concepts come from the fact that people think that our brains work also numerically. That means there is a code inside. The brain uses a code like a computer uses a code, internal code, numeric code. But this code, the brain code is not known. And I have a very strong hypothesis. This code does not exist. So there will never be the possibility of downloading our memory into a computer or uploading from the computer to our memory, because this would require knowing the brain's code. And this code does not exist in my hypothesis.
Yeah, so I think to the first point of quantum computing, that goes back to quantum physics. Einstein, among others, were having a difficult time accepting this quantum physics and what he called spooky influence at a distance, for example, where we talk about entanglement in physics, and that a particle here and another particle on the other side of the universe are entangled in such a way that they need to be treated as a collective rather than individual, and that you can never determine what the velocity and the place in space of these subatomical particles described in quantum physics are. As soon as you measure them through a device, the whole thing stops. And then you have either a particle or a wave. You have this, what they call superposition, where it's described as unlike the classical computer, which is based on zeros and ones, where the circuit is either opened or closed. In the case of a quantum computer, you're dealing with qubits. And in that case, the superposition says that it can be open and closed at the same time. And so that's where the two become different. The classical computer and the quantum computer is that you're dealing with, according to this proposition that Paul Emberson brings, it's a carryover from the old moon, where Rudolf Steiner speaks of how every morsel of matter that is brought over from the old moon to the earth by the spirits of form, Lucifer and Ahriman stand in opposition and seek to wrest that particle of matter from the spirits of form. And inasmuch as they succeed in that to a certain extent, they create a world that stands between the physical material of the earth and the old moon imaginations. And that this quantum world then takes on a kind of ghostly substance that actually is spectral. Steiner describes it as the substance of the eighth sphere that's actually ghostly, that you can witness and that you can enter into it through imagination. And so a lot of these models that the physicists are creating are really imaginations that they've condensed into theory with the help of mathematics. Now, the problem is that these quantum computing devices that have been created are very much subject to error. And so you have to totally sort of isolate their functioning. And this is done with the help of these magnetic fields that arise when you create a cryonic state where it's below freezing, where the electricity flowing through a circuit is not hindered like it is in a chip, where you don't have that cryonic situation, where as the chips get smaller and smaller, the circuits get closer and closer, and the heat gets to the point where they overheat. That's why in the data centers, you've got all this water that's being used to cool. But in the case of these type of quantum computer, it's cryonics. It's also the case with some of the supercomputers where they use this cryonic state to make these circuits smaller and smaller without the overheating that happens in these chips. And now they're, of course, also layering chips. But the understanding that, yes, it's true that the transhumanists think about being able in the future to upload or download by imitating the human brain in the laboratory, by reverse engineering it, so to speak, and creating a technological version of it. I'm not suggesting that the thinking that's happening in those devices is human thinking. On the contrary, it's Ahrimanic thinking. It's an alien intelligence. Rudolf Steiner describes Ahriman as the most powerful intelligence in the universe. And they stand many orders of magnitude above human beings in regards to intelligence. And their intelligence has this coldness about it because there's no heart. Ahriman has no heart. He has no forehead. So he doesn't have what's given to us in our moral development when we have this stage of human evolution where we're able to have executive function, which is centered in the forehead. That's missing. So he can't relate to human morality. And the ego is very much at home in that human morality. That's how we purify the ego. That's how we carve out that hard stone. So it's not the human being that is going to embody itself in the download or upload. It's the doppelganger who has to leave the human being right now just before death. That's an Ahrimanic vehicle within the human being. And these beings are the future human beings on Jupiter. You can read about this in the 5th lecture in the Mission of Michael lecture, where Steiner speaks of how Ahriman attacking from below, Lucifer from above. And he says in there also that we need to bring the Christ into the human heart. And if we fail to do that, Ahriman, who comes from below, will be able to take hold of the thinking and drag it down into the lower nature. And this is what Ahriman is inspiring, especially in that north-south mountain ranges where Silicon Valley is, where a lot of these nerdy people have gathered. And they're creating other versions of Silicon Valley in India, China, all over the place. Ahriman is inspiring these human beings through the double to want to create a counterfeit immortality, but it's not going to benefit the human being. It's going to benefit Ahriman using the double to overcome death. And Steiner talks about the places where Lucifer and Ahriman are most successful in ripping away, tearing away matter from the spirits of form, who are the Elohim. 6 of them appeared in Christ. The 7th is the Yahweh being. This is in the head region, in the brain, in the skull, which is where they're most successful. And it's because of that that we're able to free ourselves in those parts of the human being. So no, it won't be human beings thinking in these uploads and downloads. It'll be the human double that is really a human being, a being that will reach the human stage in the future. But unlike the beings who reach the human stage in the descending stages of evolution, old Saturn, old Sun, old Moon, which includes Archai, Archangel, Angel, and now us, this new human being of the future is in the ascending level where good and evil will separate. So Ahriman will use these future human beings who will reach their human stage on Jupiter to capture a part of humanity who will fall away from the Christ and inhabit this future moon that will circle the future sun Earth. And so it's an alien intelligence. It's obviously algorithms that are digital, and they get more complex, and more AI is creating its own code and will free itself from human ingenuity, which is the danger that many AI fear, that we lose control. And Ahriman can then use these. Ahriman's goal, according to Steiner in one place, is to push the plants off the earth, push the animals off the earth, push the humans off the earth, and create a replay of old Saturn, but it would be a machine Earth. That's the danger that is posed by transhumanism, posthumanism, and that's spoken of in that one lecture I quoted earlier that relates to this machine planet that comes about when the moon reunites, where we're no longer protected from the eighth sphere.
What an answer. Thank you very much. Okay, Cameron? Cameron, can you hear me? Cameron disappeared.
Oh,
Cameron.
I see you. I hear you. I'm sorry. I couldn't get off my, sorry about that. Let me,
can you show your...
Yeah, there you go. Sorry about that. Thank you so much for this presentation again. Every time you speak, it's so odd and enlightening, specifically towards anthroposophy. I also have been reading Paul Emberson's work and appreciate you explaining a little bit about his work. I know he had kind of an untimely death. Do you have any understanding of what his current group is doing, or if there's any correlation to the current anthroposophical group?
Well, I know they have they had a center in Switzerland that I think is still functioning. It was within an anthroposophical community that take care of elderly people and the like. In Scotland, they have a center where they've been taking this land that they have and creating buildings where they're seeking to further Paul Emberson's initiatives that he was helping to lead, of course. And some of this involves this impulse that Steiner spoke of, that there would come a time in the future where science would be imbued with this deeper kind of Rosicrucian Christianity, and that the work table where the engineers work would become like an altar, that substances are sacred. You want to work with the elemental beings, etc. It's no accident that Paul Emberson was invited to kind of co-edit the book dealing with Rudolf Steiner's ritual work, because Steiner spoke of the metamorphosis of the Freemasonic ritual work, of the secrets associated with the Tao, which is also the hammer that Hiram held up to call all of the workmen. This is white magic that we will need in the future and is needed to build the New Jerusalem. And so I think they have gone through stages of studying the work of other pioneers in this realm of the Strader technology, and working with the prototype that they have created, but we don't have someone who's stepped into Paul Emberson's shoes. They've been working to publish his, like the third volume, and these volumes have been expanded. The 3 volumes that are titled From Jundi Shapur to Silicon Valley are like over 1,000 pages each, and they're very hard to come by in their latest editions. And then, of course, one of the reasons is they're reticent to use the internet. They don't want to sell anything on Amazon or all the, and I think that's hurting their ability to reach more people. And I understand they're trying to draw a line and kind of, but I see a little bit of that Essene aspect there of the lily that needs the rose cross, and have compassion for all of these young people who are on the internet who need this wisdom and knowledge, rather than giving up on them and suggesting they're all prey to the adversary. You know, that's what we can do with the internet, just like we can print anthroposophical books with the same printing press that's used to further materialism. The Indians in America saw that as kind of black magic, and Steiner said Ahriman helped to invent the printing press or inspire it. So I think there's a lot to learn from Paul Emberson because of his working with this Freemasonic ritual work, which was Steiner's esoteric work up until 1914, when the war, First World War started, and later, as I indicated, he was planning on renewing some of that work in the 3rd class, which he would have led with just a circle of 12, which would include the Vorstand members. So I think Paul Emberson and his circle of people, I haven't traveled there. It would be interesting to do that, to find out more about it, but I'm mainly through the books and articles from the past. The Anthrotech has many articles that were published by the English Society in the past.
Thank you. Thank you. I was able to acquire his books, so I am going through them.
Good.
Okay, dear friends. So shall we say a big thank you to Florian and conclude our meeting, because it's almost how many? 3 hours, 4 hours. Yeah, dear Florian, thank you very much. And I'm looking forward to your serial of lectures about Grail Mystery. Yeah, it will be done from different platform, worldwide platform, which is threefold content. Yeah, and and you have one more presentation on Apocalypse, right?
Right. Yeah, so that'll be kind of trying to wrap things up in the next session. And I was trying to make this also for somebody who came in for the first time and didn't listen to the others. And I'll try to do the same with the next one, which makes it a little more challenging. But nevertheless, I think it's important. And once again, I apologize for taking so much time.
Lauren, that's all right. This is who you are. Yeah. So I think it's important to you, and it's important to us to listen, and I think it's important to you to speak. Yeah, and one more idea. So you've been talking about your practice, specifically meditative work with seals of apocalypse. Can you make us workshop for us?
Sure.
I mean, 1 or 2 or maybe 3 sessions.
I could include that in the Grail because they all culminate in the Grail seal.
Yeah.
I can do that as part of that.
Yeah. Florian, he's practicing for many years and on seals of apocalypse by watching on it and imagining and but it's whole kind of technique behind. All right, dear friends. So please feel free to say a big thank you, dear Florian, and
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you, Florian.
Thank you
Thank you
so
all.
much.
So much, Florian. It's wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you all. I know you're in Scotland there. You could visit those folks. Tell us maybe something about what's going on there. This Emberson group.
Okay. All right. Goodbye, and I'll see you soon around.
Bye-bye. Take care.
Bye, Andre. Bye, Florian.
Bye.
Bye, Andre. Thank you, Andre.
Bye.
Thank you
Yeah.
all.
Thank you both.
Yeah. Thank you.
So.